What do you get when 3 home health PTs in one business suit sit down to solve real-world clinician problems? Welcome to Home Health, Suit and Scrubs, the podcast where home health clinicians meet the business side of care. I'm Dan Haggerty, your resident suit, founder of Care in Motion and Chief Revenue Officer at In-Home Therapy. And I'm joined by the Scrubs, Brendan Kirby, Home Health PT, Lisa Thompson, Home Health PT and mind behind Home Health Chronicles, and Dan Catuccio, Home Health PT and social media personality for therapists everywhere. Before we dive in, don't forget to check out careinmotion.co, where you'll find our full podcast library, resources to help you thrive in the field, and a store full of clinician-approved products made specifically for home health pros like yourself.
Welcome to the Care in Motion podcast, which is now the Suit and Scrubs home health podcast. I'm really excited to be with everybody tonight, although I'm in a very technologically challenged situation right now, so you may not hear a lot from me today. But here with Dan and Lisa. How you guys doing?
Doing great. You
Very
enjoying
well.
Austin weather?
Yeah, I'm here in Austin, and you'd think I'd be with Lisa, but I'm stuck in a hotel room across town. So, but love your city, and I'm going to pick up one more T-shirt from the airport while I'm here.
Oh no.
Super excited tonight to be with Diane Murphy, who is the Director of Clinical Education for BAYADA. So thank you for joining us.
Sure. Great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So tell us a little bit about your role and then how you came to find us and end up here tonight.
Sure. So I provide education and orientation, onboarding, skills competency, and whatever support our clinicians need for the region that I support with BAYADA. And one of our field clinicians presented us with this trunk organizer that they had seen on the Care in Motion website and wanted to know if that would meet BAYADA requirements for infection control for them to use to organize their supplies in their car. So I, of course, brought it to my infection prevention committee. We took a look and we thought, wow, this is, a great product, a couple little adaptations we might want to make. And I went onto the website to just take a look at other products. Would there be a different trunk organizer that might meet this one little specification we were looking for? I took a look at some of the resources and information, learned a little bit more, about Care in Motion and some of the different products that our field clinicians need, right, and are looking for and would be so helpful and resourceful for them. So I just thought it would be great to connect, with your team.
Awesome. Well, we're glad you found us, and we're glad that you're here. So thank you. Maybe I can start off with just a basic question, since you're in charge of, or since one of your big responsibilities is onboarding staff. And forgive me, I lost my voice a little bit, but bear with me. Name some of the most important things to get right during a new hire's first 30 days in home health. The big points to hit home, the things that you want to make sure are ingrained, especially for a brand newcomer to home health. Things that you want to make sure they know before they hit the ground running.
Sure. So I think the first thing that's most important for our new hires to get is connection, right, to their support staff, their teammates, who's providing the education, who can they go to when they have questions and they need help, who in their office supports them in what way, right, who to ask for what. They need to learn organization and very basic fundamental pieces of their role, how to manage their car and their supplies and their day and their week and their caseload of patients, multitask and pivot on short notice, right? We sort of try to enforce that in the first week or two. Mm-hmm. Then, of course, they need to learn a good understanding of the home healthcare model and how different that is from other healthcare settings, right? How to really apply their practice that they bring with them, their clinical expertise, and how to apply that to this environment, right? With the limits of like regulatory guidelines and payer limitations and in some cases, there's even different limitations to practice standards that might be different in the home healthcare setting than where they've come from in, previously in their career. So really, enforcing those basic Medicare guidelines that we follow every day and is so ingrained in our practice, I would say those are the big 3 pieces. So being able to know who to talk to about what and when, being able to be organized and manage this weird, different practice that we all are in, and then how to apply their clinical expertise to that practice.
You mentioned support like as a first thing, which I think, for when people have questions, because as you know, inevitably there will be questions when you're first learning home health. There's so many different variables, so many different things to remember, and you are out there a little bit on your own little home health island driving around. So I always tell people when they're coming from outpatient to home health, listen, it's a bit of a different language, and it takes like 6 months before you start to feel really, really comfortable. That's okay. Give yourself grace because there's a learning curve, right?
Yep. I agree too with it being, that's kind of the number one, is finding your support group, because you really are kind of out there. You do have the support from the office and your other coworkers, but finding someone that you can go to, you can go to ask questions, and not being afraid to ask questions, because you are not going to know everything. And as much as you can be trained and go out on visits with other clinicians, you don't see everything. And there's so many different variables that we see in home health that you just can't address them all in a week, 2 weeks, a month, 6 months. I mean, I still see things to this day. I've been in it 7 years now that I'm like, oh, I didn't know that. Or what am I looking for? Is there somebody I can go to? And I have these certain people that I can call up and say, hey, do you know anything about this? Or have you worked with this before? So finding that support group is really great. And I think having a good onboarding, a good training, a precepting model when you first join home health. And so has BAYADA, has your approach to onboarding changed throughout the years?
I definitely think it has changed some. My approach initially was in small groups within an office location, in person, and then when the pandemic happened, of course, there was a huge shift to virtual training in so many ways. And I really felt like we lost a lot of that connection, right? And then, so we're now sort of trying to move back toward a more in-person, more relevant and practical training. So, and educating therapists who are coming to us from acute care, subacute, outpatient settings. I think, Dan, you mentioned how different it is, right? Really trying to focus on the more holistic, patient-centered approach, where we're not just targeting, an injury or a post-op deficit that needs restorative therapy really in that one area just for that limb or that function, right? But shifting their focus to restoring the patient's ability to manage all of their self-care needs in spite of this injury, or post-op status or illness exacerbation, right? And also working in an interdisciplinary team, because we may have a patient that's being treated by nursing and therapy, and all disciplines are really assessing for all of the patient's needs. Maybe a clinician is a physical therapist, but if their patient came on service after a heart failure exacerbation, they're still talking to them about, are you short of breath? Let me take a look at your ankles. Have you developed any increased edema? Maybe they're trying to manage safety in the home while they're have new oxygen, right? And so they're navigating the home, and they're maybe the stairs with oxygen tubing, right? So it's really a very different approach to care than those other settings. So we really shifted, in that way a little bit, therapy-wise. And then again, making our onboarding education, the training sessions and series, more practical, more relevant, using more interactive, actual patient scenarios.
That's great.
Quick question, and I'll turn it back to Dan and Lisa. But my company, in-home therapy, we have probably 30 to 50 starts a month across the country, and I would bet that within 3 months we've lost 25% of them for one reason or the other. And I'm wondering if you've seen the same thing, and if there's something that you found that you can do differently in that first 90 days to help that retention increase.
That's a great question. And sometimes we think lately, instead of focusing on the numbers, the retention and attrition numbers, let's focus more on the clinicians that we have onboarded, and really support them and focus on their needs. One thing, sometimes we struggle with the need for increased capacity of staffing. So our census is growing, and we really need to be able to care for more clients. And so we're trying to onboard our clinicians as quickly and efficiently as possible. And I think sometimes some of our offices will try to push clinicians through orientation a little bit too quickly. And those new hires don't always know what they don't know. So they're fine with that until they get to the point where they're now independent and they become, really overwhelmed and frustrated. And they go home at the end of the day with 6 visits they haven't even started to document on because they didn't really learn to document during their visits. And, sometimes that can be really difficult when we're pushing people through a little bit too quickly. So one thing we've started to do differently, I'll say in the past year or two, is my team now meets with every single office that we support and the preceptors of those offices who are working with new hires every week, so that we can try to support them in precepting. Do you need any help? We have some divisional support that can actually help with precepting in the field. At times we can provide, resources and tips for them, and always help to maintain the connection between the preceptors and the office team, so everyone is on the same page. And if possible, make sure that those new hires are moving through their orientation process according to our, standards for orientation, and they're not missing anything. I can't say that it's really changed our retention numbers a whole lot, but I do think it's made some improvement for those clinicians who have had a full orientation experience.
I think something that you may not be able to control, and I was just thinking of this when you were saying it, is home health is growing, right? And everyone's like, oh, go into home health. Like, this is the place to be. You make more money. It's flexible, all of these great things. But it's not always for everyone, because it is a very challenging field and you are out there alone, and it takes kind of a special person to be out there and to understand how everything works. But having a really good preceptor or a mentor or somebody that can go through and explain the intricacies that is home health really, I think, would help with retention rates. Because I've been on both sides. I've had preceptors where I had a really good orientation when I first got into home health, and that made me love it. I felt supported. I felt like I could have somebody to lean on. And I've moved companies and said, oh, I'll have some experience. I was out for one day with somebody and then I was on my own. So, and I've trained people where it was, hey, you're with me for 2 days. You don't have home health experience, and now you're out there on your own, and you can't learn everything in 2 days, right? And so having the support, I think, is key.
Yeah, absolutely. Our new hires stay directly with their preceptors for the first at least 4 weeks.
Yeah.
And then, depending on their prior experience, maybe they came from 10 years of home health experience and even used the same documentation system. And in that case, maybe by week 3, they're starting to do independent visits, but then still meeting up with their preceptor at the end of the day to go over any questions, any issues, anything that they need to talk about. But we have an actual 8-week process so that they're still participating in intermittent training sessions, as in between their field precepting experience. So they're learning incrementally and able to apply that in the field when they're with their preceptors, and they have that direct connection. And they really are considered, the preceptor for a full year. So they forge that bond with their preceptor. They have that trusting relationship. So they know maybe it's been 6 months, and they show at a patient's home and something happens and they're really scratching their head and not sure what to do, they know they can always call their preceptor for support or questions, or even just to say, you know what, you should call the office and talk to our rehab manager.
I think that's so huge. I mean, all you have to do is be involved in your first emergency in a patient's home,
Yep.
where you look around and you realize, oh my gosh, there's no one here like there used to be in the hospital where I used to work. There's no nurse, doctor, no, because we've if you worked in home health for long enough, you're going to walk into emergencies, and it's really nice to have, number one, support where you can contact the office and say, listen, help me troubleshoot this if you would, but at least to get the guidance of being able to really figure out what constitutes a 911 call, when should I call the doctor first, et cetera, all those different things. So yeah, I think the number one word is support there, which is huge.
Yes, for sure. Definitely.
Maybe I could switch gears for a moment. We talk about, a great orientation process, any specific things that you do, whether it's quirky or different or fun for retention, things, I know that you follow social media people long enough, like some of the funny nurses, or I know a funny PT guy that, but no, you follow them for long enough, and a lot of people joke about the pizza party. Hey, did you guys get a pizza party for PT month? Or, did you get I always joke, I never said this out loud, but I got an ice cream scooper with my logo on it, one time for Christmas and stuff. Any specific things that you like to do for retention that speaks kind of loudly to your clinicians to let them know that they are, valued and that you care,
So I'll say 2 things. First of all, each individual office location has come up with so many great ideas. And, whether it's taking the whole team out to dinner or bowling or having an ice cream truck or a taco truck, in the parking lot after their meetings, so many different things that they've come up with. They always, try to recognize clinicians during team meetings, whether it's because they saved a life during an emergency, like you just mentioned, or we just had, some clients and their family members calling in to just really, let us know that they just really appreciate the care that they've received from this particular clinician and how attentive they were. And that's really important because, like you mentioned earlier, that island that our clinicians are working on, right? They drive to that island every day and they're alone. There's no supply closet. There's no manager down the hall. There's no other nurses or therapists in another room that they can just say, hey, can you come take a look at this, right? So when they go into meetings and their office teams do recognize, the different trials and tribulations that they deal with every day, it does make a difference. And then another thing that I just started to do last year is provide a 1-day, out of the field experience for our field preceptors to really just provide some additional special recognition and appreciation for them, where they, it's partly recognition, appreciation. There's a little bit of fun. There's some education. There's some motivation. There's connection because they come together in a setting with other preceptors from other offices that they don't know or work with. And so they meet people from other office team, other offices, and they make that connection and they feel less alone, I'll say, so I think that they really appreciate that. I was a little nervous the first time I hosted it, and was really really encouraging people to come and meeting with office teams saying, please send your preceptors to this event. And at the end, I asked them all, would you do this again? Would you come again? And they said, absolutely. Could we do it twice a year? And I said, well, probably not. But I think they did really appreciate it.
Great.
So it does make a difference.
I think those little things really, really add up. They really do. Speaking from an employee for 21 years, it's when sometimes the small things, the little check-ins. I asked my audience a week or two ago, what are you guys' thoughts on a check-in? Being checked in by your administrator, like, hey, how are things going? I'm not talking like coddling, and I'm talking like a very quick, hey, how's everything going? It's been a few months. You hanging in there? Any challenges you want to run by me? This is a good opportunity for you to just let me know what's on your mind and how you're kind of holding your head up above the water, and if this is a good time for you, or if there's any concerns, whatever it may be. And a lot of people chimed in. Especially companies going through like EMR changes or partnerships, and in the midst of all this change, and before you realize, you're like, holy smokes, I haven't had a staff meeting in over a year. No one's checked in on me. You know what I mean? So just curious to hear what you would have to say about that kind of check-in from administrators to just make sure their clinicians know they're being supported. But I think you did speak to it with the retention thing. But.
Yeah,
Hey, Dan.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I saw your post. I hadn't talked to you about it, but I saw your post. And of course, my job at my company is to keep everybody as busy as possible. I'm in the sales and business development. So people are either really mad at me because they're way too busy, or they're really mad at me because they're not busy enough. And, we're always looking at numbers and metrics and everything else. And we're never looking at the people, the clinicians. And I saw your post and I was like, I'm going to call 5 or 6 of these guys that I see on these, these metrics boards, and just introduce myself and talk to them and get to know them and see how they're doing. So,
That's great.
and they were amazing conversations. And I meant to mention that to you. That was a great post. And I think obviously, Diane, I'm sure you would agree, just like reaching out from the office is critical.
Yeah. We have one of our office directors I was just talking to recently was telling me that she does that exact thing. She calls her field clinicians periodically, maybe 1 or 2 each week. She'll just reach out to. I think she's got about 50 of them, and just say, hey, I just want, hey, how's it going? And she said sometimes she'll call them, and at first they're a little, taken aback, like, everything's fine. Why? And she's just as, like you said, oh, I just wanted to see how you're doing. If you need anything, if everything's going okay, if there's anything we can help you with. And they say, oh, yeah, well, and then they appreciate it, and they have, a great conversation. And it definitely, is noticed by the field staff in our northern offices. It doesn't
cost a thing.
Right, exactly. Right. In our northern offices, especially in Vermont, some of our clinicians are literally, traveling over the mountain to get from one patient to another, and they're very distant from their offices. They might, an hour and a half, 2-hour drive from their office. So they very rarely have in-person meetings. And so I know some of them will have staff meetings by Zoom, and they try to add in extra little pieces, to really make their staff meeting fun and engaging. And I have to say that I've joined their staff meetings several times, and almost all of their staff will join the meeting no matter where they are. If they're on the way to a patient visit, or they're not even working that day, some of them will still join because they just want to know, like, what's going on this week, what's happening, and just to be involved and to have that connection, again, to hear from their office team and their support staff.
Yeah. And that's a beautiful thing, because it's doing what you said, which is focusing on the employees you already have, the ones that have gone through orientation a long time ago, but they're valuable, and in order to kind of remind them of that, that's great. I like that you do that.
Right, and it doesn't matter how long it's been since you went through orientation. I've been in home health about 20 years, and as soon as you think you've got everything figured out, either there's Medicare makes a change, or your organization makes some kind of a new policy change, or like you said, you go through a new EMR system, or there's always changes and you always encounter situations you're not sure of, so we have to stay connected.
Yes.
I think those check-ins are really important. I think you can learn a lot from your clinician. I mean, speaking from me as a clinician, there are these little things that kind of add up during your day, and you don't want to go to your direct supervisor or your boss and say, hey, these are all these little things that are happening. But if someone were to come to me and say, hey, like, I'm just checking in, how's it going? How are you doing? I feel like I'm supported. I have a space where I can communicate my concerns. And you'd actually probably learn a lot more that way about what's actually going on in the field, good or bad, right? And that's how you can address it. Because if you don't know what's going on, you don't know what you don't know, right? And somebody could be, down in the trenches, and that's where they don't feel supported, and now they're quitting, versus it could have been addressed simply and you've got an employee for life.
Yes, definitely. For sure.
So maybe I can just transition really quick. Maybe this will be our final talking point potentially, unless Dan, you want to chime in. But I think all of that retention ties in very much so to something that's prevalent and something that's kind of always on my heart, which is the topic of burnout. Which, prior to recording, we were talking a little bit about how it's prevalent. All you have to do is go on social media and you see it, and it's loud. And it's kind of contagious a little bit, like negativity is a bit contagious, right? When people start talking and right. So, one of the things that I like to kind of preach to my audience is like little things we can do within our day to really celebrate the good that lies within home health. Like, you're doing home health for a reason. Why is it that you want to stay in here? When you go online and you look at all these other jobs, why do you want to stay in home health? What's special about it, right? The little things, like being able to, heck, I'll document under a tree by a river if I can. Do you know what I mean? I will take the extra 5 to 10 minutes and finish my Oasis discharge, like doing something unique that you cannot do when you're surrounded by 4 walls. And being able to do those things. Now, my first 15 years, I didn't do that. I always felt rushed. I had little ones. I felt like I owed it to my kids and my family and my wife to rush home to get to my babies. And taking a 10-minute lunch would mean, well, now you're going to get home 10 minutes later, Dan, But this is the stuff that I really try to talk about right now, because it's so important to be able to reach that key goal, which is sustainability. How do you stay in this setting and have this sustainability to be able to want to stay in it for 5, 10, 15 more years from here now, right? So I just wanted to hear if you have any specifics that you think about when you're talking with staff about how to kind of reduce those burnout potential things.
So I sort of preach almost to every new hire. First of all, if nothing else, as you're working with your preceptor, learn how to document after every visit. Don't go home at the end of the day and have 6 visit notes that you have to start from scratch and document.
Amen.
Right?
Amen.
It will take you double the time, because
100%.
you have to
And
think
you're not
about
going to remember what you did.
exactly which patient was that, what did I do with that patient. You have to take notes during your visit, so then you're looking back at your notes. Don't take notes. Put all your notes right into your documentation system.
Yep.
Right then and there in real time.
Yep, absolutely.
For
The hardest part is getting in. Oh, sorry.
No, I was just going to say, for a lot of people, that will make you or break you, because nobody wants to work all day and then go home and work all night.
And yet, what do I read? I mean, I read it all the time, and people will joke with me. They'll say, you're eating a lunch? What's a lunch? Or you finish your documentation before 4 p.m.? That's impossible. And I'm like, it is not impossible. Like, it is, there's a mindset shift that has to happen. You can't be writing vital signs on a napkin. You get it in there, right? So I think that is so huge that you talk about that on day one, because it's huge.
Yeah. And you don't need to write it on the napkin, because you have a tablet or a laptop or some device. Everyone is electronic now. You have some device in the home with you during your visit. Write it there.
Mm-hmm.
I think the topic the topic of burnout, it can kind of come in phases too. And I'm the first to say, I think home health is the best field ever, and don't ever want to leave it. But I'm currently in like a small little phase of burnout right now. And I'm using, some of the things Dan said of, I just kind of sit in my car and take 5-10 minutes to myself and to recoup. And I'm also, within like these last 3 or 4 weeks, there's a lot of different factors, but saying no to things that I know I can't, I know that will like push me over the edge in a sense. I'm already at productivity. Can you go do a last minute admission? Like, well, knowing for me where I'm at, like I can't do that right now. And being able to say no. I mean, I know y'all probably don't want to hear that on the clinician side of say no. But if you're at where you are, it's okay to say no sometimes if it's gonna add that, I'm gonna now get home at 6:00 and I'm gonna miss out on my kids' sports, or I'm gonna be then working later at home. So ways to combat that burnout and kind of get back on track. And I also haven't had a vacation in a while, and we're going on vacation tomorrow, and I think that'll reset everything.
Awesome.
Yay. Good for you.
I mean, and what is a last minute admission? It's not like it's a 15-minute visit, right?
Right. It's a 2.5. I mean, this is an extra 2.5, 3 hours to my day. It's not, I had that today. I've had 6 points and my day was planned. Like, can you go down here and do this? And I'm like, I can't. I've got to pack for my trip tomorrow. I have multiple errands I have to run. This would get me home at 4 or 5 o'clock today. So,
and yes, we do tell the clinicians, if the office is calling and asking you to add a visit or move things around, take a look at your schedule today and your week. And is that possible to move a visit to another day so that you can accommodate a new patient? But sometimes it's not. And it is okay to say, unfortunately, I'm not able to do that. Right? It is okay. And then I say, don't go to the office and say, Diane told me to say no whenever I want, but think about it, it's not going to do the patient any good if you're burnt out and tired and not really focusing as you should. And then you rush through that visit, that start of care visit, and then you go home and you try to cram through the documentation as fast as you can. And then maybe the next clinician seeing the patient, because you're just covering for another person, doesn't get all the information that they need, right? Or who knows what could happen in that situation. So we always are trying to accommodate, but sometimes we do have to decline.
And not even, the patient getting the brunt end of that, but even the agency. I know from our perspective, there's been plenty of times where it's like, don't push this person beyond this limit. We know those limits, because all that's going to do is create, they're going to leave. They're going to quit. They have so many options. They can go anywhere. And is that one extra visit or every week pushing them a little further going to be worth losing them altogether? And the answer is always no. Like, you have to respect those boundaries for each person.
Right. Absolutely.
Especially because early on when clinicians want to impress their administrators, like they're going to go above and beyond, and they're going to do that, and then it's going to become routine, and then people are going to expect it, and it's this pattern, and then they've got this like perfectionist mentality, and they're like, I guess I can never say no, and then they go home and they cry every night, and it's like, this is not a good cycle here, right? We have to find out what that balance is.
Yeah.
Well, Diane, we always try to keep our episodes to about a half an hour, and I feel like we only got through half of what we wanted to talk about with you, but I think that's a perfect excuse to have you back. Really, really appreciate all of your input and insights. Can't wait to partner more closely with you and work on some initiatives to help all of your clinicians and all of the home health therapists that are out there. So thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you,
Absolutely.
Diane.
Thank you
Thank you so much.
Yeah, this has been absolutely amazing. So until next time, this has been the Suit and Scrubs podcast. So visit us at karenmotion.co and check us out. And of course, download and subscribe to our podcast wherever you get your podcasts from. So thank you all so much, and we'll see you next week.
Bye, you guys.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.